Hello, I'm Elisa, the receptionist, and I'll be your host for today. And I'll be covering a very interesting topic, which is, can MBTIs predict the susceptibility to certain mental disorders? Now, before we get into what really MBTIs are, for those who are already familiar with the idea, there are often stereotypes surrounding MBTIs. For example, ISFPs are known to be very emotional, kind of like crybabies, while INTPs are rational thinkers, so they would deny any kind of emotional judgment. And now INTJs are notorious for being manipulators or just psychopaths. So this is what we'll be talking about today. And obviously, any mental disorder does not depend upon your personality type. However, it can influence it or make an appearance in statistics. So let's just get familiar with the idea of MBTI. So let me just share my screen. So what is MBTI? Taking a bit longer. So MBTI stands for Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It's a personality typing system that categorizes people into 16 different personality types. So it's built on Carl Jung's psychological theories, and yeah. So the four main dimensions are, so this is the first letter that's shown in your MBTI. So it is extroversion or introversion. So it is denoted by an E or an I, so which is pretty self-explanatory. Then the second one is sensing or intuition. Third is thinking and feeling. This is really what differentiates between thinkers and feelers. So yeah. Then there is fourth, which is judging or perspective, which is the last letter in your MBTI. And so these are some examples: INFJ, ENTP, ISFP, and ESTJ. So let's just ask it if MBTIs can predict susceptibility to certain mental disorders. So the short answer is no. MBTI cannot reliably predict. So the keyword here is reliability, reliable. So some patterns, which is, so MBTI isn't scientific in the clinical sense. So it is more like a theory. It's based upon psychological theory. So it's not scientific or something factual. So that indeed it cannot totally depend upon it, and it lacks predictive validity, right? And yeah, so it's based on Jung's typology. So yeah. However, personality types can show tendencies. So let's just see. Introversion, so the possibility vulnerability is anxiety, depression, because focus is more inward. And intuition, so existential anxiety and tendency to live in abstract possibilities. So they have this way of thinking that they think it like what if perspective and not what is. So then there's feeling, emotional burnout, mood disorders, high empathy, emotional overload, thinking. So that is stress and detachment. So this is something that differentiates feelers and thinkers. So when, for example, thinkers face a challenge or any kind of stress, they do not really just ponder over it or get very emotional about it, attached to it. They kind of tend to dash themselves or just be like they do not care. So this is, they have a more rational approach, to be fair. So yeah. And there's judging, that is anxiety, perfectionism, need for control and order, perceiving ADHD type like symptoms, procrastination, difficulty with structure, and impulsivity. So let's just ask ChatGPT certain mental disorders, high numbers of INTJs as psychopaths. Let's just see if it gives the answer we're looking for. Taking awfully longer today. It's crazy. I had a quiz today in university, and I was planning on cheating, and my ChatGPT did not work. So this is giving me flashbacks. So important clarity, no scientific evidence. Okay, perfect. So psychology and the dark triad. So this is a very popular test, same as MBTIS 60 personality. So this is really just it has three categories. So it has narcissism and machiavellianism and psychopathy. So let's just see. So these are the traits that really, these are common with mental disorders. So this is a great way to actually, study this topic and see if it really resonates with what we're discussing. So, reported patterns, INTJ. So, their tendency is sometimes overrepresented in dark triad self report studies, likely due to emotional detachment, strategic thinking, and low agreeableness, not actual psychopathy. So, psychopathy, that literally what it means is that they do not care about their loved ones, anyone in general. So, they'll do whatever they feel like without any kind of remorse, let's say. So that obviously that is not something and personality can just show. It really has to have certain aspects behind it. But INTJs have made certain appearances. If what people are into book reading, even some series they watch, they'll often see that the villain or the more psychopathic character would be most probably a TJ or TP. So it'd either be INTP, INTJ, sometimes INFJ. So around these kind of MBTIs because they tend to show those kind of traits, but it's mainly INTJs. So then we have ENTJ and they have higher narcissism scores. Well, that makes sense because they have an E in their MBTI, so they're extroverted. So they wouldn't be shy about what they're actually have in their inside. So they're driven, confident, goal oriented, may appear self-centered or controlling. Wow. So right, that does make sense for them. Then we have ESTP. That's an unpredictable. I wouldn't think that ESTP would be here, but let's see. So they have strongest correlation with psychopathic traits. Wow. And highest impulsivity, charm, risk taking, thrill seeking. Who's the charming manipulator? Wow. High impulsivity, charm. So they, I guess they have facets, I guess. We have ISTP, moderate overlap with psychopathy, emotionally detached, calm under stress, logical. Yeah, calm under stress. That is a very prominent psychopathy trait. So whatever they're facing, they'll just act like they do not care. It does make sense, yeah. So depression and anxiety. INFP and INFJ, so they have the highest rates of depression and anxiety in surveys, deeply emotional, idealistic, often internalized pain. So this is also where, for example, one finds out they have the same media type. There is this kind of a social construct that when they know that there's a stereotype surrounding them, they start acting that way or making themselves feel like that deliberately. So obviously that's not true for everyone, but this is just a kind of like just like an aspect. So they might deliberately feel like that. They might get influenced that they have to feel it that way. So yeah, it could be like not actual depression, but something they really built later than what they would actually feel like. So originally, so yeah. And we have INTP, I am prone to existential depression and isolation. Yeah, INTPs have a great, um, they have very, very big stereotypes that they tend to isolate themselves a lot, like a lot. So yeah, then we have ISFJ and ESFJ. Anxiety linked to people pleasing and fear of disapproval. So ISFJ and ESFG, that makes sense for them because ESFG, especially because extroverted again, so people pleasing, they might be more social, they have more connections with people, so they might feel like they have to be a people pleaser. And then they have J in them, so they're judging. So yeah, that does make sense for them. Then we have ENFP and ENTP, they have mood swings, rapid emotional highs and lows. So we have OCD and perfectionism now, and ISTJ, ISFJ, and INTJ are more likely to show obsessive compulsive or perfectionist tendencies, high structure, control, and orderliness. Notice how all of them have I's in them and then J's in them. So J is because it stands for judging. Obviously, whenever they do, if someone else does it, they do it, they will have that judging aspect, so they'll be prone to think that they have to do it perfectly, so that, and then introverted, so they do have high status for themselves or even for others, so yeah, they have this. And we have INFJ and perfectionism rooted in moral and emotional ideals rather than structure, so on moral compasses, I guess. Then we have ADHD and impulsivity. This has, so the MBTI that shows it the most is ENFP, ENTP, and ESFP. So all of the extroverts and all of those, the perceiving ones, all of them have P in them. And most of them have N in it as well. Wow. So frequently self-report ADHD traits. So self-report, wow. Distractibility, novelty, seeking difficulty with routine. You're right. So they're very unstable with what they do in their daily lives, whether it's their routines, their focus, how they're performing. We have ISTP, and they also show impulsivity, sorry, with but with more control and focus, right? So slightly better than the E's and P's. Borderline or emotional dysregulation. So the first MBTI is INFP, then we have ENFP, then we have ESFP. So the most dark MBTI types would be ESTP, ENTJ, and INTJ, and ENTJ, INTJ are notorious for it, so that does make sense. It's most emotionally sensitive, INFP, and INFJ, because obviously they have F in their MBTIs. The most anxious and perfectionist type, ISTJ, INTJ, and ISFP. Impulsive and distractible. That is ENFP, ESFP, and INTP. This might need, for someone who does not understand, they might need to be more familiar with MBTIs, or just, whenever they hear like the letters, they can just, kind of form a mind map of what they'll be like. So if they have like INTJ, for example, so they know they're introverted, intuitive, then they're thinkers, they're judging. So that kind of does make a sense, an image in your mind. So this is just a very irrelevant question. I just wanted to ask ChatGPT, which MBTI is to show schizophrenic trait? No, not schizophrenic. Let's just rephrase it. With schizophrenia and DID. Let's see. I don't think that have scientific evidence, but let's see what it comes up with. I mean, obviously, it would not have scientific evidence, considering that MBTI is barely reliable to actually detect mental disorders. So yeah. Why is it taking so long today? But a tricky one because both schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder are complex clinical conditions and can't be predicted by the MBTI, as I said. So context based, let's just ignore that. So patterns and found in studies and surveys. A few small studies that type psychiatric patients found IN. So the first group is like INs, that is introverted and uh, intuitive ones. So the observed tendency is overrepresented among schizophrenia spectrum patients. So INTP, INFP, and INFJ, the most reported ones. Most common types reported in schizophrenia-related studies are self-reports. INTP often linked to detached abstract thinking and a weak connection to sensory reality, similar to cognitive symptoms, not causation, just resemblance. Okay. Then we have INFP and INFJ found more often in schizotypal or schizoid profiles. Introspective, imaginative, sometimes isolating inner worlds. This does not mean I've been on Pronto. Okay, that just makes sense. Dissociative identity disorder. So the patterns are INFP is the most reported one. So extremely inward, found, focused, richer, inner world, idealistic, prone to dissociation and a trauma. INFJ also frequent deep empathy, strong compartmentalization of self, tendency to split aspects of personality, cope with guilt or pain. Wow, that is interesting. Then we have ISFP and INTP. INTP is quite overlaps in a lot of those disorders. Occasionally found detached, emotionally compartmentalized styles. Okay. So the most schizophrenia comments are INTP, INFJ, and INFP, while for GID it's in INFP, INFJ. So that is it for today. I think that was an interesting session. It's really not something we discuss because it's more theoretical than actually very medical centered or psychiatric centered, because there are not a lot of terms or a lot of the brain working here. It's just more theoretical. If MBDIs really do help detect it, which obviously do not, but it's really interesting to see if the statistics that these MBDIs are more commonly found in certain types of disorders, or let's just say any kind of psychiatric aspect. So that is it for today. It's just in the life now.